animal. Every one of any experience in psychoanalysis has undoubtedly seen such cases and has received the same impression from them. But I can refer to only a few detailed reports on the subject. This is an accident of the literature of such cases, from which the conclusion should not be drawn that our general assertion is based on merely scattered observation. For instance, I mention an author, M. Wolf of Odessa, who has very intelligently occupied himself with the neuroses of childhood. He tells in relating the history of an illness that a 9-year-old boy suffered from a dog phobia at the age of 4. "When he saw a dog running by on the street, he wept and cried, 'Dear dog, don't touch me, I will be good.'" By being good he meant not to play violin any more, to practice onanism. The same author later sums up as follows: "His dog phobia is really his fear of the father displaced upon the dog, for his peculiar expression, 'Dog, I will be good,' that is to say, I will not masturbate, really refers to the father who has forbidden masturbation." He then adds something in a note which fully agrees with my experience and at the same time bears witness to the abundance of such experiences. "Such phobias of horses, dogs, cats, chickens, and other domestic animals are, I think, at least as prevalent as pavor nocturnus in childhood, and usually revealed themselves in the analysis as a displacement of fear from one of the parents to animals. I am not prepared to assert that the widespread mouse and rat phobia has the same mechanism." I reported the analysis of the phobia of a 5-year-old boy, which the father of the little patient had put at my disposal. It was a fear of horses, as a result of which the boy refused to go in the street. He expressed his apprehension that the horse would come into the room and bite him. It proved that this was meant to be the punishment for his wish that the horse should fall over, die. After assurances that relieved the boy of his fear of his father, it proved that he was fighting against wishes whose content was the absence, departure, or death of the father. He indicated only too plainly that he felt the father to be his rival for the favor of the mother, upon whom his budding sexual wishes were by dark premonitions directed. He therefore had the typical attitude of the male child to its parents, which we call the Oedipus complex, in which we recognize the central complex of the neuroses in general. Through the analysis of little John, we have learnt a fact which is very valuable in relation to totemism, namely, that under such conditions the child displaces a part of its feelings from the father upon some animal. Analysis showed the paths of association, both significant and accidental in content, along which such a displacement took place. It also allowed one to guess the motives for the displacement. The hate which resulted from the rivalry for the mother could not permeate the boy's psychic life without being inhibited. He had to contend with the tenderness and admiration which he had felt for his father from the beginning, so that the child assumed a double or ambivalent emotional attitude towards the father and relieved himself of this ambivalent conflict by displacing his hostile and anxious feelings upon a substitute for the father. The displacement could not, however, relieve the conflict by bringing about a smooth division between the tender and the hostile feelings. On the contrary, the conflict was continued in reference to the object to which displacement has been made and to which also the ambivalence spreads. There was no doubt that little John had not only fear but respect and interest for horses. As soon as his fear was moderated, he identified himself with the feared animal. He jumped around like a horse, and now it was he who bit the father. In another stage of solution of the phobia, he did not scruple to identify his parents with other large animals. We may venture the impression that certain traits of totemism return as a negative expression in these animal phobias of children, but we are indebted to S. Ferenczi for a beautiful individual observation of what must be called a case of positive totemism in the child. It is true that with the little Arpad whom Ferenczi reports, the totemic interests do not awaken in direct connection with the Oedipus complex, but on the basis of a narcissistic premise, namely the fear of castration. But whoever looks attentively through the history of little John will also find there abundant proof that the father was admired as the possessor of large genitals and was feared as threatening the child's own genitals. In the Oedipus as well as in the castration complex, the father plays the same role of feared opponent to the infantile sexual interests. Castration and its substitute through blinding is the punishment he threatens. When little Arpad was 2½ years old, he once tried, while at a summer resort, to urinate into the chicken coop, and on this occasion a chicken bit his penis or snapped at it. When he returned to the same place a year later, he became a chicken himself, was interested only in the chicken coop and in everything that occurred there, and gave up human speech for cackling and crowing. During the period of observation, at the age of 5, he spoke again, but his speech was exclusively about chickens and other fowl. He played with no other toy and sang only songs in which there was something about poultry. His behavior towards his totem animal was subtly ambivalent, expressing itself in immoderate hating and loving. He loved best to play killing chickens. "The slaughtering of poultry was quite a festival for him. He could dance around the animal's body for hours at a time in a state of intense excitement." But then he kissed and stroked the slaughtered animal and cleaned and caressed the chicken effigies which he himself had ill-used. Arpad himself saw to it that the meaning of his curious activity could not remain hidden. At times he translated his wishes from the totemic method of expression back into that of everyday life. "Now I am small, now I am a chicken. When I get bigger I will be a fowl. When I am bigger still I will be a cock." On another occasion he suddenly expressed the wish to eat a potted mother, by analogy potted fowl. He was very free with open threats of castration against others, just as he himself had received them on account of onanistic preoccupation with his penis. According to Ferenczi, there was no doubt as to the source of his interest in the activities of the chicken yard. "The continual sexual activity between cock and hen, the laying of eggs and the creeping out of the young brood," satisfied his sexual curiosity, which really was directed towards human family life. His object wishes have been formed on the model of chicken life when we find him saying to a woman neighbor, "I am going to marry you and your sister and my 3 cousins and the cook. No, instead of the cook I'll marry my mother." We shall be able to complete our consideration of these observations later. At present we will only point out 2 traits that show a valuable correspondence with totemism: the complete identification with the totem animal and the ambivalent affective attitude towards it. In view of these observations, we consider ourselves justified in substituting the father for the totem animal in the male's formula of totemism. We then notice that in doing so we have taken no new or especially daring step. For primitive men say it themselves, and as far as the totemic system is still in effect today, the totem is called ancestor and primal father. We have only taken literally an expression of these races which ethnologists did not know what to do with, and were therefore inclined to put it into the background. Psychoanalysis warns us, on the contrary, to emphasize this very point, and to connect it with the attempt to explain totemism. The first result of our substitution is very remarkable. If the totem animal is the father, then the 2 main commandments of totemism, the 2 taboo rules which constitute its nucleus, not to kill the totem animal and not to use a woman belonging to the same totem for sexual purposes, agree in content with the 2 crimes of Oedipus, who slew his father and took his mother to wife, and also with the child's 2 primal wishes, whose insufficient repression or whose reawakening forms the nucleus of perhaps all neuroses. If this similarity is more than a deceptive play of accident, it would perforce make it possible for us to shed light upon the